Welcome to Praxis Journeys, where we explore the paths of today's most influential leaders in education and the real-world strategies they're using to drive lasting change. I'm Vinay Ganti. In each episode, I sit down with the people shaping the future of our schools to talk candidly about the big issues: teacher recruitment, leadership, innovation, school culture, policy, and more. Whether you're an educator, administrator, or advocate, you'll find fresh ideas and actionable insights to inform your own journey and help students thrive. Let's dive in.
Today on the show, we have two guests from the organization New Leaders, an organization committed to strengthening leadership in K-12 schools through a wide range of innovative solutions, including a national fellowship for aspiring leaders. With us today, we have Jean Desravines, CEO of New Leaders, and Denise Dennis, Chief National Aspiring Principals Fellowship Officer. This conversation explores evolving demands on school leaders in K-12 education, highlighting the complexities they face in a changing societal landscape. Discussion covers the challenges of leadership recruitment, the importance of community engagement, and innovative approaches to leadership development, including the use of technology and cohort-based learning. The speakers emphasize the need for diverse leadership and strategic workforce development to address the teacher and leader shortages in the education system. So let's get to the episode. Thank you both for joining today. Do you guys mind just introducing yourselves and your roles at New Leaders, and then we can dive in?
Jean Desravines, CEO of New Leaders.
Denise Dennis, Chief of the National Aspiring Principals Fellowship Program here at New Leaders.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. So we're super excited to have you on the show today, mainly because we know the importance of leaders and their impact that they can have on K-12 districts. I wanted to just maybe start with some of the big picture questions, and we can sort of take it from there. In your eyes, what are you seeing as changing demands for school leaders these days? And how are you all sort of trying to help them for these changing demands that they're seeing at the leadership level?
Yeah, so I'll start and turn it over to Denise to share some reflections. In many ways, what we're seeing is the level of change and disruption in K-12 has never been higher. We're still coming out of a once in a century pandemic that has had significant impact on not only students, but educators. You compound that with the level of disruption we're seeing driven by technology, AI, and schools, teachers trying to come to grips with it. And finally, just the political climate that has really impacted all sectors, including education, in a way that it has not in the past. And at the end of the day, what we're seeing is because oftentimes schools are the center of communities, and principals are often tasked with leading those school communities. They're often having to deal with all of these elements that they've not had to deal with in the past. Denise, what would you add?
I mean, I think I would echo a lot of what you've already stated. I think the role of the school leader has always been complex because schools are ultimately reflections of our society, right? And K-12 school leaders have to be prepared to respond to the ways in which both opportunities and challenges in our broader ecosystem are present within the school communities that they have the opportunity to lead. Couldn't agree more with what Jean shared just about, the recent pandemic, the racial reckoning following George Floyd's death, the insurgence of artificial intelligence, the push for local decisions regarding curriculum. All of those things impact, the principal's responsibility to balance, immediate needs with longer term sustainability and innovation within the schools, while also just caring for students' well-being and academic persistence.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very sort of palpable, probably shift in the identity of a school and a community, right? Whereas historically it was probably seen as more of a given component of the overall fabric of a community. Now it's almost like a flashpoint, or it can become a flashpoint for debate or controversy or even division within that community because of how things have been. Is probably the best way to describe it. How are you seeing that change? Or in New Leaders' work? Because I mean, you obviously, and maybe this is a good opportunity also to maybe take a step back and just like summarize all the various things you all are doing, everything from the fellowship, which I know we've collaborated on, to some of the work you're doing with, right, in the districts and the school leaders themselves and building capacity directly and other areas. How have you seen this change in dynamics and context that principals and district leaders have to face impacting sort of the just like the overall attractiveness and desirability of becoming a school leader, right? Because we don't just have a teacher shortage, we have a leader shortage in this country as well, and those sort of prey upon each other, and it's creating a vicious cycle. So I'd love to hear your thoughts there.
I'll start by sharing the work that we have done and the work we're currently doing, and we'll turn it over to Denise to share some of the challenges we've seen as it pertains to the attractiveness in this moment in time of becoming a school leader and what we see as some of the opportunities and lessons learned based on the work that we're doing with the fellowship, which we're partnering with you on. For context, we've been in existence for now over 25 years. And during that period of time, we have served over 8,000 leaders, impacting over 2 million students across 42 states, the majority of whom are leaders of color, overwhelmingly serving low resource students of color. And I think what we have been proud of is the fact that through 3 external evaluations, our results have shown that our leaders statistically outperform their peers in math and reading. They stay in the role much longer than their peers. As importantly, they tend to stay in education uh, in a large percentage. So, just to give you a very concrete sense, 80% of our leaders are in their roles 5 years or later. So it is something for us to be proud of. What we have started to see is the role becoming less attractive and a significant level of burnout. Our sense is over the next 3 years, 30 to 40% of leaders will likely walk away from school leadership, particularly in low income communities. And that has a significant impact, as you alluded to, in terms of the culture of the school, destabilizing schools, and likely leading to greater turnover within teachers. I think it was that recognition that after the murder of George Floyd, we decided we had to move the needle, particularly on both closing the representation gap and identifying the next generation of transformative leaders who are proximate to their communities. And that's why we decided to launch the fellowship, which is a partnership with preeminent historically Black colleges, Morehouse College, Clark Atlanta University, and we've been fortunate enough to have an amazing leader in Denise who has made that work a reality and has allowed us within a 3-year period of time to now be the second largest provider of leaders who are much more proximate to their communities and representative of their communities. And Denise can talk both about that work along with some of the challenges and opportunities as it pertains to recruitment of those leaders.
Yeah, happy to jump in here. As Jean indicated, we launched the National Aspiring Principals Fellowship to be an online principal preparation program in collaboration with mission-aligned colleges and universities. Who started off working with Morehouse College conceptually to kind of design the program, expanded to Clark Atlanta University and HBCU and Bank Street Graduate School of Education, a minority serving institution in the state of New York, to be able to reduce the barriers that exist for people to engage in these types of programs and really provide them with the tools needed to be successful in the role. I do think we see a lot of people who are unsure about moving into school leadership. I think in part because while they may have a passion for educational excellence and equity, they are not quite sure how to turn that action into tangible practice and affect change within their building. So our program has really been focused on those job embedded experiences that can help build people's confidence and give them the skill sets needed to manage change that's required in the building to have a positive impact on students and ultimately improve life outcomes for kids.
I think that's so important, especially when we see average tenures, not just for leaders of color, but all leaders across the board going down. For me, I came from working in higher ed adjacent before coming to ETS Praxis. Actually, that fellowship is very close to home for me because I actually worked at a former company who was one of the first partners in helping bring that program online. And it was actually one of the first deals I helped sign when I first joined that employer before coming here. So I'm very impressed by all the progress you've made in that time, especially because you were building it pretty much off the back of the pandemic, right? Actually, during the pandemic, and then launching it right after the pandemic ended, or subsided, for lack of a better term. Uh, But yeah, but in higher ed, we're faced with an opposite challenge, which is tenure is actually the problem on the opposite end, right? It's like we need to figure out how to get tenure to no longer be a calcification around new ideas when it comes to different ways of operating higher ed, and really sort of be willing to look honestly at the cost structures of these institutions that are now in a very precarious state. And in K-12, though, it's that we need more tenure, right? I think the latest stats is that 30% of teachers will leave after 2 or 3 years or something like that. So like, especially and that number jumps in a Title I or in a lower income school, and leaders have the same challenge happens in leaders. And if you're you're like a 8-year-old kid, and you know that there's a good chance that you're not going to have the same teacher again, or that your younger sibling is going to have a brand new teacher right after you, or whatever it is. It's like it's a very unsettling dynamic, right, for everyone involved, parents, for students, for the administration, for the staff. So something you hit on, Denise, I would love to hear more about, which is this sort of feeling or maybe anxiety around not being able to make the change that they want to make. And so that sort of holds people back from maybe even trying in the first place. How do you all sort of work to sort of help build that confidence or that capacity? Like, what do you all sort of focus on that? That's
So, a couple of things come up for me. One, I think within our program, we have a cohort based structure. So, we create this community of like minded individuals who come from all over the country. It's really interesting because I think at first, there were all of these questions, and Jean will probably remember this of, well, can you just have a Chicago based program? Can you just have a Memphis based program? And we really focused on the program being a national program and it being a national cohort. And I think what those cohort based discussions bring about is the opportunity for people to see the similarities in our differences. So whether you are working in, a rural school in Texas or an urban school in West Contra County, California, there are similarities in terms of the types of problems of practice that you are trying to resolve. So I think that cohort-based structure has been something that's been really powerful for leaders to work together to collaborate on, really thinking about solutions to some of these problems of practice. We also leverage virtual coaching. So we have coaches that are assigned to our participants that give them the opportunity to really grapple with things that may be happening in their building and practice and get feedback before they actually implement the leadership move that they would like to implement. And then we also have just content, in my opinion, that is focused on personal leadership, in addition to all of the other things that we know are so critical for school leaders to be successful. I think we find that personal leadership is really important as an anchor for people to be able to be the adaptive leader that can identify the difference between a technical problem or an adaptive problem and figure out the appropriate solution. So I really feel like the construct of the program in and of itself, with the cohort based model, the coaching, and the content focused on personal leadership, has been important, as well as our curated internship experience that we call the residency. So, not just did you get 100 hours in your school this semester, but really thinking about aligning those hours with very specific experiences that we think school leaders need to have to be successful longer term.
Yeah, no, I mean, it, it is. It is pretty remarkable how much of one's career in K-12 education can feel like you're on an island, right? And it's almost like you're like stand-up paddleboarding from one island to another, right? When you do get a promotion too, it's like, oh well, when I was a teacher, kind of felt like I had to figure everything out for myself, but now I kind of got the hang of it, and I want to try my hand in becoming an assistant principal. Maybe assistant principal, you have a little bit more of colleagues and stuff, but then if you become a principal, you're sort of like once again it's lonely at the top, and then you work in the district office and you sort of have paddleboard to another island, and so I think there's something to be said about the role of professional networks and cultivating those, right? It's just not it's not like these people went to and got an MBA where they were taught or trained to like maintain and build networks and manage this, and it's not like they have time either, right? To sort of just like do those sort of coffee chats anymore and everything. So I can see why intuitively encouraging people or giving them that sort of national cohort level community, right, to sort of lean on could be so powerful in helping them say, just being able to call someone up and be like, look, I'm really not sure I can do this, and be like, well, I've been here before, and I felt that same way when during this time, the first year is always the toughest or whatever it might be. Yeah, I think that's super interesting. Jean, you mentioned at the front end of the call, some of the big things was, in addition to the pandemic, was also like the technology piece, like the disruption that's happening with AI and other things. How is new leaders looking at that, both from a challenge perspective, but also maybe from an opportunity perspective, given sort of the role that you all sit as being change makers or innovators?
It's actually a great question. It ties into an earlier point you made around how do we address this acute teacher and leader shortage that we are seeing. So, one of the things that we are really excited about, in addition to the fellowship, we are about to launch a what we're calling the Accelerator, which is a competency based AI embedded program focused on paraprofessionals and teaching teacher assistants to get them on a fast track to get a teacher accreditation and a bachelor's in order to really think about how do we significantly both grow the pipeline, get teachers who are much more proximate to their communities who've actually been in schools to become teachers and who actually are much more representative than the current teaching force. And one of the key components of that is thinking about how we leverage technology through a purely asynchronous model that is adaptive based on the learner's needs. And how do we also use this as an opportunity to start to reimagine what education, what the teaching profession looks like, whereby taking away some of the significant burdens and challenges that teachers face, which makes the job really difficult. For example, thinking about lesson plans, all of the administrative components, and leveraging AI to basically supplement the role of teaching, not to replace teachers. It's something that we're really excited about, both for this accelerator program, but also looking at how we can embed it into the work that Denise is leading through the fellowship.
Yeah, I think we've started to take some strides in this direction. Like, as I think about our recruitment and admissions process, we're leveraging an asynchronous interview that gives us insights about the candidates themselves through AI, just based on their responses. We are also really thinking about, of course, as I mentioned, how we can continue to enhance our virtual coaching models, and going through a process right now too, where we are thinking about an audit of our assessments and how we leverage AI in that assessment process to ensure that people are getting even more immediate and timely feedback that they can take within their schools. So I think that's some ways programmatically in which we're trying to leverage AI right now. And then also just trying to figure out different ways to continue incorporating the use of technology in K-12 schools. So really thinking through, what does it look like for a school leader to leverage AI? What does it look like for a school to have more personalized learning paths, for students using some of these these newer technologies. And then also on the flip side of that, how do we ensure that AI is not, being a detractor or inhibiting student learning and development of critical thinking skills with an overusage, so to speak, of it. So just continuing to grow and learn in that area as more information comes out.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, both the idea of leveraging and training up leaders on understanding the nuances of AI, but and sort of expanding into providing pathways for parapros. I mean, both of those could have, you know, exponential impact. I mean, I think I'm probably off on the number, but I'm not orders of magnitude off. Is like I think they said that's around like 800,000 parapros in this country. So if you think about if we could figure out if whoever figures out a way to scalably build a pathway for even a quarter of them, the teacher shortage kind of goes away in some ways. And to your point, Jean, like these people are already they're already working in the community. So it's not like they're going to have culture shock. They're actually going to get a pay raise, right? So like the salary thing, at least in the short run, will actually be a net win for everyone. They already, a lot of them, especially like the higher level parapros, are already teaching some of the most challenging classroom climates, especially the special ed parapros and others, right? If they're in the high needs classroom, they're already dealing with some of the most challenging, not in a normative way, but challenging in just like the day-to-day way, right? Classrooms out there. So we're super excited. And we're in conversations with some of the members on your accelerator team of ways we might be able to support you there. We're really excited about the future of pathways in general and unlocking, I mean, and ideally though, I think those parapro professionals could end up becoming excellent school leaders one day because they'll have seen it from every single dimension, right? The level of empathy you would have as a leader at that point of like every single person in the building would be dramatic. So I know we're sort of running almost at time for today, and I'd love to sort of maybe find another. uh, Sorry, Haji.
You you hit on so many important points. Uh, just want to underscore a point you made because it's so important. When often talk about people who are leaving the profession from 2021 now, the single fastest growing sector in K-12 education is paraprofessionals, as you alluded to, at over 850,000, close to a million. So these are
Right.
people actually entering our education system, and we have not, I think, been as thoughtful and strategic about how do we build up their skills, get them the necessary certification, and why I think this partnership we have with ATS is so important in order for them to enter teaching and down the line become both school and potentially system leaders. We've not been as strategic and intentional as we need to be to support them.
Yeah. I think which gives us great opportunity to change that in the coming years. So I'll just leave it with one last question, and you all can answer us briefly or as extensively as you like. Beyond technology, AI, like if you were sort of talking to or when you do go out and talk to your fundraisers today and other policymakers, because I know you all get to be in those rooms, what other big bets are you sort of telling them to sort of prepare for when it comes to K-12 education? Like AI is going to completely change the classroom and the way in which we work, but what else are you talking to them about that they should be thinking about for the next 5 to 10 years?
So I'll share a couple of reflections and turn it over to Denise. Everyone is focused, understandably so, on AI. There's another area that we're seeing tremendous focus and energy on. And quite frankly, no one has really thought about it around what does it mean for education. Significant energy is being spent around workforce development. But when people think about workforce development, they're thinking about healthcare, technology. We just used a great example about a great workforce development strategy as it pertains to paraprofessionals and teacher assistants, where you can potentially increase people's wages by 2 to 4x than they're currently making now, which would incentivize them to go from thinking of this as a job to a profession. And as we have been having conversations both with funders and policymakers, that has resonated. Thinking fundamentally differently about how you think about workforce development as it pertains to K 12 is a great example. So, whether it's the work we're talking about with paraprofessionals, or for that matter, the work that Denise leads with the fellowship, where going from a teacher to an administrator increases your wage by 30 to 50,000 a year, which is a meaningful increase, is something that we've been talking to key stakeholders about. Denise, anything you would add?
I agree. I think sitting on the student side of it and working with students who are trying to, you know, finance their way through programs. I think anytime we can talk about apprenticeships and advocate for that, anytime we can talk about loan forgiveness and scholarship opportunities, those are things that come up for me as being some of the most critical things that are needed to remove barriers from people's participation in programs that can increase their aptitude and ability to lead in K-12 schools and ultimately have the positive impact that we want to have on students.
Mm, mm,
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Yeah, I mean, we could probably spend a whole nother 30 minutes just on some of these topics, right? I mean, I think there's, you know, uh, I think sort of bringing it back to where you all started the conversation around the role of the school and the community. One thing we talk about is one thing we don't think about at all is like, could we view the full range of jobs available at a district? So not just the teaching jobs, but the non-educator jobs as well as starting points to her career pathways in other ways, right? Like everything from like the school nurse to the school
mm-hmm,
psychologist, but even like the van drive, the school bus drivers and other things like you basically have to have the equivalent of a CDL in a lot of states, a commercial driver's license, to be able to drive the bus. Like, is there a way to sort of help them upskill themselves in
mm-hmm,
other ways and like, sort of start to view the school as potentially an economic engine, right, for that community?
mm-hmm.
Also, like, I wonder, Denise, I would love to hear your thoughts at some point in the future. Is there an opportunity for like career changers to come into the leadership funnel? Like we've seen the sort of alternate cert sort of model for teaching. Are there examples of alternate pathways for school leaders, right? Do they have to only come up from the teaching ranks, or can we bring in people from industry into the leadership as well? But these are all, I know that I want to be respectful of your all the time. I want to say thank you both for the time today. I look forward to making this more of an ongoing discussion with you all. New leaders is always, you know, Gene, you already dropped 3 or 4 new things that you're already working on. So I feel like this is not a one and done conversation. So I look forward to having another one of these maybe 6 to 9 months from now and telling the world again all the great things you guys are up to. But in the meantime, thank you again for your time today and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for listening to Praxis Journeys. You can subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And if you know someone who would find this conversation helpful, feel free to share it with them. I'm Vinay Ganti, and until next time, keep learning, keep leading, and keep working toward the kind of change our students deserve.